All right, guys, give me your attention. Again, feel free to keep eating. There's still some leftovers there. Get you a go plate. Don't feel like you need to eat all that banana pudding. I'll take that back to the house. If you got the email, I told you last month we're trying to get this Joe Show thing rolling, and I'm going to try, probably won't be able to do it every month, but I'm going to try to tie our talk to something relevant to the time of year. I told you in the email it was springtime, into March, so we're going to talk about sandals, the same kind that Jesus wore. So you think, I don't know how we're going to get a devotion out of sandals, but this is some stories in the Bible that I've read. Again, it just didn't pop out to me at the time, but would you think that sandals could be used to seal a contract?
Yes.
Binding. You a preacher, you already read it.
I will.
There's a story of Ruth and Naomi in the Bible. Naomi was the mom. She had two sons, Ruth and another lady married to brothers. All three of the men in the family died. I don't know what they were eating, but all three of the men died in the family, leaving all three of the women widows. They moved back to their homeland, and they evidently had some land there before that they were trying to gain back, and they caught the eye of a farmer there named Boaz. And there's a whole other story about Boaz. We'll get into that one maybe sometime later. It's kind of funny. But Boaz caught their eye, and they caught Boaz's eye. Ruth must have been kind of a cute gal. He started leaving more in the field. They would go behind their farmers and glean, and he had his harvesters to leave some extra to get their attention. Boaz found out who they were and wanted to reclaim their property and get Ruth as his wife. But customarily in those days, their customs were very strict, and Boaz had a relative between him and Ruth that had first dibs on the property and Ruth. And he had to gather the elders together and have a session with the man, with the witnesses of the elders of the city, in order to get permission to marry Ruth. So he did that, and the guy said, look, if I do that, it will mess up my inheritance, so I'm going to pass. And he passed the opportunity over to Boaz. Boaz accepted, but in that negotiating, Ruth chapter 4, verse 8, therefore the close relative said to Boaz, buy it for yourself. So he took off his sandal, and that confirmed the deal. He passed the sandal to Boaz, and I've read that, but I never really caught it, that it was that serious a deal. No lawyers needed, just pass the shoe. Now, if you think I'm kidding, Deuteronomy is a book of the law, basically the law of Moses, and I got to read quite a bit here, a little bit more than I normally read here, and I don't have glasses, so they're telling what I might read here. But Deuteronomy 25, 5 through 10. Just bear with me a second. If a brother dwells together and one of them dies and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall go into her, take her as his wife, and perform the duties of a husband's brother to her. And it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears will succeed to the name of the dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. But if the man does not want to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up a name to his brother in Israel, and he will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Then the elders of this city shall call him and speak to him, but if he stands firm and says, I do not want to take her, then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, remove his sandal from his foot, spit in his face, and answer and say, so shall it be done. So the man who will not build up his brother's house, And his name shall be called in Israel the house of him who had his sandal removed. She gets her revenge back, and his name is the house of him who had his sandal removed. Now, I was listening to Robert Morris talk about this, and Robert always kind of puts himself in there, and he says, can you imagine this fella going in to buy a house and get a mortgage? And he sits down and says, okay, let me fill out some paperwork. He said, what's your name? He said, what's your first name? He said, The. He said, T-H-E, The. Yeah. He said, okay, what's your last name? He said, Removed. He said, your last name's Removed. He said, yeah, Removed. He said, okay, we better get your full name. What's your full name? And it's like, the house of him who had his sandal removed. And the guy says, oh, I see. You're that guy. He said, what she looked like. Kind of bossy was she. So the customs back in that day were pretty serious, And I was just looking, thinking of some other stories. I guess the most popular story was about Moses, about taking the sandals off. And he saw the bush burning. He wondered why it wasn't consuming. So he went over to the bush. God spoke to him, told him to take his sandals off because he was on holy ground. And I'm thinking, all right, God was there. It's holy ground. That's part of it. But was he taking his sandals off to make a commitment to God? Because Moses had no confidence in himself. He said he was not a good speaker. He said he was not a leader. He couldn't go talk to Pharaoh. He needed support. And I think part of this taking his sandals off with reading about these customs was, all right, I'm giving you my commitment by taking my sandals off that I'm on your team. Just kind of my thinking. There's more to removing the sandals than the holy ground thing there, I believe. There's another situation that I had read before, and again, I just hadn't put it together, hadn't really thought about it. But Joshua took Moses' place. Joshua 5:13. Just a second. And it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, a man stood opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, are you for us or for our adversaries? And he said, no, but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped him and said to him, what does my Lord say to his servant? Then the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, take your sandal off your foot, for the place where you stand is holy. And he did so. There's another situation where a man took his sandals off. Now, what I really want to ask you is, when you read this, and one version that I read said Joshua ran to him, but you're in a foreign country, you don't know the people, and you see a man standing with a sword drawn, and you run to him. I don't know about that. And then when you ask him, you obviously didn't know him, because he asked him, are you for us or for our adversaries? How you like this question? Just answer. No. You for us or them? No. What he's saying is, I'm not here to take teams. I'm here to take over. I am the commander of the Lord's army. Commander in this case was capitalized, which most Bible theologians think that was actually Jesus in the Old Testament days. When angel of the Lord is capitalized or commander of the Lord's army is capitalized, they think, a lot of people say that was actually Jesus in early days in the Old Testament, presenting himself. So I think what he's telling Joshua is, I'm in charge. You join my team. I'm not here to join your team. I'm not their team nor your team. I've got my own team, and you take your sandal off, showing your commitment to us to be together. Joshua couldn't defeat Jericho. They had a great wall. You know the story. He had to march around it 7 times to get the wall to fall. There was no way that they could have beat Jericho without that help, without the Lord's help. So again, he pulled his sandals off as a sign of commitment. I'm all in. I'm on your team. I'm not leading my bunch. We're on your team. So I'm thinking, how in the world can I bring these old customers, which we know are kind of funny, odd they wouldn't work today, into relative of what we're doing now. I read a book. I went to Florida a couple of weeks ago with some friends. I really don't know why I went. I thought we were going to go fishing, but it turned out we were going to watch basketball games. Every time I'd ask about going fishing is, what time's the game start? No, we can't leave. The game starts in 30 minutes. So we sat around the pool, but the good news is I took me a book. It's kind of odd. Billy Graham wrote that book in 1992. I don't know why we have this book, it being that old, but it was in my house. We moved recently. It made the move. A lot of stuff did not make the move because we're moving out of a 3,000-foot house into a 1,600-foot house, and it don't fit. So a lot of stuff didn't make the move, but I picked up that book as a last minute going out to catch the airplane, and I read it sitting there, didn't have anything to do, so I read a book. He wrote it in 92. Franklin revised it in 2010 to include the World Trade Towers and some other things. It is amazing what is in this book. Everything that you see going on today, the news media not being truthful, giving you their opinion instead of what's really happening, he plainly says people will see evil for good and they'll call good evil. That's going on every day, every day. He talks about the movies and how they influence people, and especially the kids, and how the schools are going to go more liberal and more woke. Don't use that term, but he talks about it. And it's amazing that somebody can write a book 30-some years ago, and you look around today, and it's going on right in front of us. It's storm warning. I'm going to probably do a little more reading and studying, and maybe do next month or sometime some more on this book. It is really a good book. And I think, what can we do to get through the storm? It's kind of a funny story. I think Robert Morris told this one too. He said, the disciples were in the boat. There's a great storm blowing. They were all scared to death, afraid they were going to drown. They looked up and Jesus in the front of the boat asleep. He said, we in a storm and he's in the boat asleep. He said, he's there with us all the time. And I'm going to probably wrap it up with, Mr. Randy couldn't be here tonight, but 2 weeks ago, he did our service for Wesley, gave Wesley a much needed week off, give him a little bit of a break. And his sermon was really good, but he had 4 words that I want to talk to you about. And it's got to do with turning in your sandal or being committed. But 3 of those words were, in today's world, what we do: repent, repent, repent. We always go back. We repent, repent, repent. He said, if you just do this one thing, you won't have to worry about repent, repent, repent. And that word's surrender. If you just surrender. You ain't got to pull your shoe off. We're in the new times. But if you just surrender to God, surrender to doing the right thing, you don't have to repent, repent, repent. So, I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming.